Good day. My name is Hendrix and I am a trainer of Aeres Training Centre International in Barneveld, the Netherlands. And I'd like to explain a bit about first-class rearing, which, as I mentioned here, is really conditional for first-class egg production. If you want first-class egg production, then there are a few conditions. You will need first-class young hen of 17 or 18 weeks, a pullet. But if you want to have a first-class young hen of 17 or 18 weeks, you need to do first-class management, of course, but you also would like to have first-class rearing, that is what I mean. You also need a first-class day-old chick. You also need first-class incubation. You also need first-class hatching egg. You need first-class parent stock, etc., etc. It is a complete chain. Now, we usually don't have influence on all these aspects, and you may have to accept the chicks we can get. But if you are involved in rearing, we can influence rearing. And really, like I said before, if you want first-class production, you must also do first-class rearing. How do you recognize a first-class rearing? Then you have a bird which has, first of all, it has the proper weight. Depending, of course, on which hybrid or which breed you're using. But in general, light, usually white layers, they should have a weight of 1.2, 1.3 kilograms. And heavy layers, like brown layers, at an age of 17 weeks, should have a weight of about 1.4, 1.5 kilograms. So that's one thing you want. You want the birds to have the proper weight. You also want them to have the proper body conformation. There should be ample skeleton development, but of course, after all, the oviduct is a big organ and it needs to be able to fit into that chicken. So you need a big chicken, in fact, related to the hybrid, of course. You need a good uniformity, because having a good average weight is one, but if some birds are too heavy and other birds are too light, then those are not good either. So you want a good uniformity. And besides, a good uniformity is also an indication that your management of rearing was first class. So it's also a quality aspect. And what do I mean with good uniformity? That means that if 80% of the birds have a weight of plus 10% or minus 10% of the average weight. Now, this is in gray. This is for Europe. In Europe, we have aviary systems in which birds should be able to fly. But I imagine that's not relevant to your case. So this is to come back to that flying. This is an aviary unit in the Netherlands. This is a rearing unit. And you see the various platforms. You see a lot of strings. And in this way, we gradually, every day, we increase the height of those platforms to stimulate the birds and to teach the birds how to fly really. But like I said, probably not relevant for you yet, because I imagine that also in Bangladesh, in time, you will have to get rid of the battery systems, and you have to look for alternative system. But not yet, I hope. Now, the first-class rearing also, they have the proper behavior. Not so important if you keep them in cages, because there's hardly anything to behave actually. But if they are on a floor system, and there are also systems in Bangladesh where they are on the floor, then we need to have they need to have the proper behavior. Especially, they should not be aggressive, they should be stress resistant, they should not be grouping, they should not be resting on the floor, and they should lay eggs in the laying nest. Obviously, they need to have sufficient protections against relevant diseases, and that is usually what we do by means of vaccinations, and then we can test that by blood titers. And we also need to ensure a well-developed immune system. And how to realize that, I will come to that later on also. And they also need to have the appropriate light schedule, because if you are getting pullets which are already used to 16 hours of light per day, then there is not much to increase and that means you're losing quite a bit of potential of production of eggs. Now, to prepare the whole reception of day-old chicks in our case, quite obvious, we have to start in a clean unit. It has to be disinfected. It has to be well maintained, and all repairs have been done before you receive the chicks. You want to make them comfortable in this week. Now, of course, you want between flocks, the longer you want to wait between flocks, the better it is from a biosecurity point of view, but it's also the more expensive, of course. Usually 3 weeks are recommended, but I know that in the Netherlands sometimes it is even less than 1 week. But although we do careful disinfection, and we also test the degree of disinfection in our case. We need to heat the unit well in advance, especially layer chicks. They need quite a high temperature. And do realize that it's not just the room temperature which is to be heated, but most important is the floor temperature. The floor has to, and before the floor is reaching the proper temperature of at least 28 degrees, that might take a while. It might even take more than 1 day. But getting a good floor temperature is even more important than getting a good ambient temperature. And once the floor is warm enough, only then you apply litter material. Because if you apply litter material too soon, then it will take much too long to heat up the floor. Or you might not heat it up at all, and then cold air will draw the chickens, will draw to the chickens. You also want to give them light, and I always recommend to give them 22 or 23 hours of light rather than 24 hours of light. Of course, during the first days, the chicks have to find feed and water immediately, but they also have to get used to darkness. So therefore, 1 hour or maximum 2 hours darkness per day, I would also recommend. On the litter, or if you have slats, on the slats, I would like to place some paper also. Those could be special chick paper, but it could also be newspaper. It helps the chicks to walk a bit easier. The sound is also attracting other chicks for eating and drinking. So all in all, paper on the floor is a good idea actually. And then of course we need fresh water and fresh feed everywhere at the correct height, so that just before the chicks are placed, because if you leave it in the unit for too long, the quality will deteriorate. So the first days, what you need to do is mainly, often you have to observe the chicks. Are they eating well? And are all of them eating well? So therefore you can check the crop, you can feel the crop, and really after about 12 hours, 85% of the chicks should have been eating. And after 24 hours, actually, I don't want to find any chick which has not been eating yet. The thing is that eating stimulates growth, of course, but it also stimulates the development of the intestines, of the digestive system. And apart from that, it also stimulates the development of the immune system. And both the digestive system and the immune system are being developed during the first weeks only. I'll come to that later on. During the first days, again, like I said, observation, and then also, are they drinking well? The chicks drink a little, only just a little, and the temperature is high, so there is warm water in the unit, and there is potentially a fast development of bacteria and biofilm in the drinkers and in the water lines. Not easy to prevent this. So what you could do is you could replace the drinkers frequently, so you don't have to fill them up completely. You might have to refresh them several times a day. And if you have a drinking line, like a nipple line, for instance, you could frequently rinse the water line. Like I said, the temperature inside the unit will be more than 30 degrees, but the ideal temperature for chicks to drink is about 24. So it's not easy to realize. Water must be available for all chicks, of course. So make sure there is sufficient pressure on the nipple lines. And if you have bell drinkers, there must be a relative high water level. Just to find out what is most appealing for chickens, take a chair and observe them. Yeah? Also check the distance to the water and the comfortable height of the water sources. Make sure that the chickens are easily drinking water and that they can find it easily as well. Now then, the first 2 weeks, do realize that if you have problems during the first 2 weeks, and I keep repeating that, it may have consequences for the rest of their productive life. Things are happening here which are really essential for the rest of the time. And also, once you have a good discipline, once you have a good management during the first 2 weeks, then it's most likely that you will also keep up that discipline for the next weeks to come. So again, observation. I keep repeating this, but do realize a chicken is not a machine. It's not a machine you can switch on and off, and it does not always, the behavior of the chicken is not always predictable. So if you want to get to know your chickens, just sit down and look at them, listen to them, smell them, make sure you get to know your flock. So, and they will tell you whether the temperature must be changed. Yeah, you can see that yourself. They are not able to regulate their own temperature, and they should have a temperature of about 41 degrees, but only after a few days. But you can see the behavior of the chicks, whether they are able to whether they feel too warm or whether they feel too cold. And it should not be too dry, the relative humidity above 40%, although mentioning this is fine, but it's not easy to realize. Changing temperature is much easier than changing relative humidity. But if it is too dry, you might have problems with dehydration of the mucous membranes. You might get sticky butts. You also have to check whether they're eating enough. So I would like to record every day how much you give them and how much they would be eating. Are they realizing the proper weight? So weighing them, I would weigh them at least once a week to see if they are still on track. And if not, try to find out what happened and how you can prevent it and how you can improve that for the next week. And do they show their desired behavior also, if they are meant to be kept, if they are going to a house with a floor with a deep litter, or even an aviary system if you have that. So then the behavior of the chickens is also important. And surely, of course, are they healthy? All those things need to be monitored very careful, actually. You need to give them vaccination. I hope in Bangladesh is not as bad as it is not as extreme as it is in Europe. In the Netherlands, during rearing, we might vaccinate the birds some 25 to 28 times even. So every time the chicken is suffering a bit, and there is it's quite stressful to realize all the vaccinations and still having the bird to grow as fast as they should. Because every vaccination, the bird is weakened more or less, but temporarily. So you have to prepare the vaccination carefully, you have to plan it carefully, you have to execute it carefully, and give them some aftercare also. You could give them some vitamins, for instance. So here I have a picture of the development of a picture of chickens growing up from 1 week to 30 weeks. And then especially important now is the development of the organ systems in pullets, because they are not simultaneously developing, but they develop in a sort of a sequence. And it's interesting and important to know that, actually. So here is the total schedule, actually. That is a picture I got from Highline. And let me put my picture a bit to the side. So what you see here is the age of the birds in weeks, from 0 weeks up to 40 weeks even. And then you see the rearing period for us is usually between 0 weeks up to, let's say, 17, 18 weeks or so. And in this period, especially the skeleton is developing, the muscles are developing, the cortical bone is developing, the immunity system and the digestive system is developing. And you see that the immune system only develops during the first maximum 4 weeks. So if your birds are not able to to develop the immune system properly during the first weeks, then you are in trouble. The same for the digestive system, actually. Now, what you also see here is a line which indicates how much weight gain there is. And you see that every week they're growing faster, and after about 9 weeks, the growth rate is reducing. But here, just before they start laying eggs, the growth rate is accelerating quite a bit because they are developing their ovary. And the ovary is the oviduct in total is quite a significant part of the body. And then gradually afterward, the growth rate is reducing again. Yeah. And the body weight line is according to this fat blue line, actually. Then there is a body score part. And don't worry, I will come back to more details of this schedule, of this body score part. And this is the keel bone. You can indicate that here, and then on the sides you see muscle growing. And you see that while the birds are getting older, you get more muscle growth on the birds, and you also get a bit more abdominal fat. You can see that also there's hardly anything to be found, and later on it's getting harder. And at stage 4 or 5, we have first less than 0.7 centimeters, and then more than 0.7 centimeters. And then our observations are there is low fat muscle in a pyramid shape, and there is an increase in the abdominal fat pad. Now, what we want is this circle, we want score 4 and 5 are ideal for pullet at the beginning of the egg production. So what we could do is we can just pick up chickens at this stage or earlier even and feel whether we can feel some fat in the abdominal part and whether we can feel how the muscle is developing alongside the keel bone. And you do that the abdominal fat condition, you feel that, you ply it, pinch the skin of the abdomen between the vent and the tip of the keel. And then, like mentioned here, you pinch and roll the skin gently between the thumbs and finger to feel its thickness. And this way you can find out whether and how much fat there is on both sides in the abdominal fat. This takes some experience. You have to do that. You have to practice that, of course. But this is quite a nice method to assess the condition of the birds, really. The breast muscle development is also important, like I said. And also here you can simply feel with your fingers. You can feel along the keel bone how the development of the muscle is. And by 12 weeks it should be very sharp. But by 18 weeks you should clearly feel on both sides of the keel bone, you should feel some muscle. And at 16 weeks you feel somewhere in between, actually. This is not so difficult, quite easy to find, actually, quite essential also. So we said that there's a weekly increase in weight and development of the organs during rearing, and that it is in a sort of a sequence. We have here the first weeks, the immune system and the digestive system. Then we have bone, muscles and feather. And then finally, after 14 weeks, the oviduct starts to develop. And the skeleton is developed. 95% of the skeleton has been developed already after 13 weeks. So if your chickens are too small at 16 weeks and you want them to become bigger, if you want the skeleton to become larger, then it won't work. It's too late. Yeah? Just like humans, people don't grow anymore after they are 20 years old. They don't become any taller. So no matter how much you are feeding yourself after 20 weeks, it won't help, of course. From 0 to 6 weeks, an essential period, of course. Like I said before, here, this is the place where we have the immune system and the digestive tract. Very important. If you have a problem here, they will become permanent. So you will not be able to repair it anymore. Stress can lead to permanent digestion problems. So you want to have, once again, I want to stress out the importance of a good brooding system. Disruption in the development of the immune system can lead to reduced disease resistance, but also it will also lead to the fact that vaccines might not be effective anymore. I have here a picture to illustrate that. This is a picture I took of a poultry farmer who had some local chickens, and I noticed that he had a chicken house, and then in front of the chicken house there was some small chicks, as you can see here. So I was asking the farmer, what is the situation? Why do you keep these small chicks with these bigger chicks? And then he explained to me that all the chickens in this picture actually are 7 weeks old. So that means that these chickens are 7 weeks old, but also this chick is also 7 weeks old. So I was asking him, what are you planning to do with this? And he said that, well, this small chick still needs a bit more time before it will get to the bigger chicken. But let me tell you, people, that this bird is 7 weeks old now. The immune system is developing only during the first 4, maybe 5 weeks. And also the digestive system should have been developed already. So it's not going to happen anymore. So even if you wait a year or so, this chicken will never become a very good chicken. You're simply too late for that. So also you see here another example here of birds showing that they are growing according to underweight. They are not growing enough. They simply became too small, just a few grams maybe, or just 100 or 200 grams in this case. Not enough weight. And then we follow those chickens and see what will happen. And then they start producing, but they simply are not able to sustain production because they don't have enough volume. They are not suitable for laying. And that is mainly a problem. The problem is not in the laying period. The problem here is simply in the rearing period. So I just want you to illustrate how important this rearing period really is. Then from 6 to 12 weeks, we have the muscles, the skeleton, and the feathers are important here. And if you have problems here, you might not have enough muscle reserve or enough bone reserve for sustained egg production. The body may be not big enough for the ovary, for the oviduct, which is going to develop. So also an essential period, actually. And like I said before, by the end of the 13th week, already 95% of the skeleton has been developed. So, and it will not develop much more after that, just some 5% maybe. So you really need to take care of this period also. The growth plates in the bones, they calcify, and then the hen may increase in weight, but it will not increase in size. And since the calcium reserve is linked to the skeleton, also that is a limitation for the egg production. And again, due to handling, management, vaccination, can postpone or even cancel this rapid growth. So be careful also in this period. And then the last part, the 12 to 18 weeks, this is the moment, this is the period during which the ovary is developing. And you don't want to mess around with the ovary because that is where your eggs are coming from. Really important. And also the muscles and fat reserves will be developed here. Of course, you don't want too much feed because that will lead to too much fat. But you need some fat, of course, and too little feed or even stress can postpone the beginning of egg production. So you don't want that to happen either. So in general, I have here some general target weights on 6, 12, 17 or 40 weeks, comparing light layers with heavy layers. They are very much depending on the hybrid, but in general, this is what you have to look for. And if you know your hybrid, you better find the management guide and make sure you reach these targets. You want them to be 480 grams if they're heavy layers at 6 weeks, etc. Really important. Like I said, uniformity is also important. I would like 85%. In this case, I want more than 80% of the bird should have a weight between minus 10% of the average weight or plus 10% of the average weight. It is really an indication if the uniformity is not good, then it is often a problem. The result is possibly a health problem. It could be because of overcrowding. It could be because of insufficient feed quality. It could also be because of insufficient feed intake, feed management, feeding times, feed space, the feed trough not empty once a day, stress, all kinds of stress due to vaccination or climate, water limitations. Well, all in all, every mistake you make during rearing will have an effect on the uniformity. So in other words, if you have a flock which has a very good uniformity, you're also almost sure that the rearing was first class. The light schedule is of course important. During the first days, like I said, I would like to have 22 or 23 hours with about 30 lux. And after that, it could be reduced. And in Europe, and we have closed houses, we can reduce to even 10 hours per day. But in Bangladesh, you will not be, if you have an open house, that will not be possible because you simply have to live with what the day length is in Bangladesh. Then afterwards, we're going to constant 10 hours, or in tropical areas, often 12 hours, up to about 12, 16 weeks. But then the intensity may increase if you have that possibility. And then later on, you're going to increase even more at 16 weeks. So afterwards, you can gradually increase the day length by half an hour every time. Every week until the birds have about 16 hours of light per day. Now, what is happening is this is the graph of the laying period, but what we are interested in now is especially the first 2 weeks. And you see that the birds, when they are older than 20 weeks, they are laying, and the production is reducing gradually. The egg weight is increasing, the body weight is increasing. But the most dramatic developments will happen in the first weeks, from 18 to 20 weeks. And in this case, you see it even better. What is happening here? So the egg weight is increasing, but you also notice that the birds, they are eating about 75 grams at 16 weeks, but they will be eating at about 22 weeks. They will be eating already more than 100 grams. And the body weight is 1.4 maybe at 16 weeks, but they're going to be at week 20 weeks, they have to be 1.7 kilograms already. So a lot is happening in those weeks in the transition period from rearing up to peak production. And that also means that often things go wrong here, especially if you have to bring birds from one unit to another unit. You have to be very careful here. Make sure, monitor them very carefully. Are they eating enough? Are they drinking enough? Are they well enough? Because if you have problems here, it will postpone egg production and quite a bit, and even reduce production if you have bad luck. Okay, thank you very much for your attention. And if you need more information, I have placed my email here also. Thank you.